What up, everybody? It's the Build Different podcast. Justin back from vacation. We're semi hating on you from your trip and your amazing pictures in Italy. But Justin's back, Sean here, myself. Today we wanted to talk about athletes. You know, big thing now is longevity. You see it with LeBron, you see it with Brady. Guys playing at the highest level and still able to contribute and be a factor on the team. Then there's, some of those guys and girls that retired way too early and thought they had more left in the tank to give. And then there's those that retired a little too late and probably you didn't see them at their best essentially. So I want to talk about that and kind of go it's kind of along those lines of when do you stop? How do you know how much juice you have left? So with that being said, Sean, like what are some of the athletes that you think they walked away too early? Like you still want to see them play. You thought they had more left to give to the game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first people that comes to mind for me was like Calvin Johnson when he retired. I'm a big into fantasy football, and I remember, every year fantasy football, Calvin Johnson was beast, beast, beast. And then, he was only 30 years old, and he also didn't do what I think a lot more players do these days, which is like kind of like a send off year, where they like everyone knows they're retiring and they, like he was very quiet about it and didn't say anything. I actually did see, a very good like little mini documentary about it, and I read some articles about it, and he explains that, one of the reasons he did retire when he did was the team performance. The team was kind of looking to rebuild, and he didn't want to go through another rebuild. But then also, um, the injuries really, piled up, and it was like by the end, he couldn't do all of the things that he used to be able to do. His range of motion wasn't as good. His cuts weren't as crisp. Like so, from his perspective, he just felt like he wasn't the same player that he was. And I think that's something that, like, from a fan perspective, we only see, we see the stats, we see the big plays, but we don't see, after every game, the ice baths, the being brutally sore to the point where you can't walk. And so he kind of explains a lot of that in that documentary, and it was kind of powerful because that's something you don't see. But at the same time, as someone who loved watching him play, I was like, man, like I bet he could have put out another, you know, at least 2, 3 seasons of 1,000 yards receiving, if not more than that.
Justin, how about yourself?
Um, when I think it's funny because I was thinking about retirement from the world of like MMA and stuff, and I feel like
Yeah,
retirement is such a it's like it doesn't carry the same weight. I feel because I feel like people retire and then like a year later they're not retired. Like Conor McGregor, I think he retired like 4 times, maybe not 4 times, but he said he's retired like 2 or 3 times, and then he always comes back. Or I don't know. There's so many other fighters that they make a big celebration of this guy's retiring. It's the end of his career, and then a year later he's doing boxing or something like that. So they don't retiring does to me doesn't feel like it has that weight in combat sports. But as far as like fighters retire or athletes retiring too late, on the other hand, I'm trying to think. There's a lot of guys like Cowboy Cerrone or BJ Penn or even someone like Tony Ferguson who's getting up there in age.
yeah,
I think he's 39 now, 38, and that's MMA is very much a young man's sport, and sooner or later you kind of have to go fight against these younger guys, and it's hard to keep up with them. And you know if you don't walk away at the right time, people start to lose sight of how good you used to be because they only see your
yeah.
most recent loss to the younger guys, and it kind of tarnishes your own legacy, which is kind of an unfortunate thing in MMA. I think
Yeah, I think combat sports is that tough one because it's like, and I would say football too, because you're taking so much damage over time, and like Sean said, you don't see the what happens behind the scenes. But I think that you know you pointed out a few in MMA that were just kind of like, because you these are legends of the sport, and what sucks about it is, and it happens in every sport where guys and girls hold on for too long, is that the younger generation doesn't appreciate them the way that they deserve to be appreciated because they see them in their decline state. They're not doing the things they used to do, and then social media is now like is brutal, and so like even a BJ Penn who was like, I mean, amazing, amazing lightweight. He held on a little too long, and it's such a pride thing and a machismo thing for fighters, especially to say, yeah, I can still handle this. I'm still the guy. I'm still the girl. And then they just decline, and over time you get worn down, and you're not your chin's not the same. Your reflexes, you definitely need your reflexes for fighting. It's
Right.
not the same, and so it diminishes them too. And then so much of combat sports, I would say more so in boxing than MMA, but it's your record. You know what I mean? People, that's what you're held by, your record, and people start seeing the losses on there. Like, was this guy or this girl really that great?
Yeah.
Like even Fedor. Remember, Fedor's a guy that has been holding on too long, and he was. I mean, Fedor was like he had a mythical status around him. You know what I mean? He had this aura around him, like he was that guy from Pride, or from Russia, from Staryovsko, Russia, or whatever. That was just like I don't know. He was just unstoppable. Remember, he got pile drived in one of his matches. I think it's Kevin Randleman. That's what man. It's been some years. Kevin Randleman like pile drived him on his neck, and like the dude, it would have broke anybody's neck or their back or whatever, and he survived. And I mean, he won that fight. And I mean, there's so many instances. Even Frank Mir, and it's boxing and MMA is a sport that I would say even more so MMA, where they hold on and they keep trying to make more money, and it's sad and unfortunate to see. So I would agree with you, Justin. There's a lot in the MMA and combat sports realm. In sports, like boxing. I mean, sorry, NBA for instance. I think Kobe held on a little long, but I mean his skills really you didn't really see like he wasn't like he needs to be out of the league. It was just like the injuries just started piling up on him, and he still was phenomenal, phenomenal player. But he was one guy that was like, man, I wish he would retire and not hurt himself any further. And there's a lot in football as well that kind of hold on, but those are kind of the ones that pop in my head. But I'm with you, Justin. You know, yeah, the combat sports is a whole different breed. But
Ricky,
Sean, would you say though that like, go ahead, sorry.
what about you? Do you think there's anyone that comes to mind of retiring too early? Like anyone specific?
Yeah, I mixed it around because I'm like I started going back to the retiring too early. So you retiring too late. So you're saying retiring too early now, Sean? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Um, I would say, well, I'm a Jordan guy, but Jordan, when he first retired, there's a lot of theories around why he retired that first time. But he was at the top of his game, and arguably, I think he could have won another two, three championships. Obviously, he came back and he won. He won three straight. So I think he retired too early, and I think he retired early again because I think he still could have continued to win championships. Jordan could have rattled off probably 10, 11 championships, I think, in between the years that he retired. He could have been up there with Bill Russell. Um, I think that one that needs to be mentioned from a combat sports perspective is GSP. I think he still had more left in the tank. He
Hmm.
was he still I think he there was still some fights everybody wanted to see. But I think that Khabib was one that's always going to stick out as a guy that he's had so much more left in his tank. And I understand he said his mother wanted him to retire, and he was really close to his mother, and he was already pretty dominant. But there was a lot of fights that we still wanted to see. And I think he wanted to pass the mantle to Islam. So that's one I would say. How about yourself, Justin?
Yeah, I was thinking about Khabib too, because I think he was only maybe 30 when he retired, and he only fought like three guys that were in the top five. You fought what Connor, Dustin, and Justin. I think there was still a lot of other fights. We never got to see the Tony fight, unfortunately. Which I know it's nowadays it doesn't sound like it has that much weight just because of the way Tony's performed his last few fights. But again, it goes back to at his prime, Tony was kind of the killer of that division, and so was Khabib. And yeah, it sucks that we never got to see that fight. But trying to think, there was also Zabit Magomed Sharipov in the bantamweight division. He also retired really early, I think, because of COVID and stuff. But people were hyping
Mm.
that guy up like crazy. They were saying like him versus Yair, he could be a future champion, all this stuff. And that guy was really good from the fights that I saw. So yeah, I think a lot of it. I don't. When it comes to, I think the reason why people don't stay retired in combat sports, maybe it's like a combination of like they miss the sport a lot, but I wonder how much of it is like a financial component to it. Maybe that's why football players or basketball players, maybe that's why they're able to stay retired is just because there's more money in those sports. So I'm wondering how much of that is like the reason why people combat sports athletes end up coming back.
I would say yeah. It's a financial thing for many of them. Boxing, it's a lot of these guys make tons of money, and you can always continue to make money if you have a name. So I think with boxing, it's like, yeah, let me just get back in there. I think too, like so many, and I saw it, the other day. I went into, when I went to Fusion, or whatever. You see a bunch of like fighters in there, like even former UFC fighters. They still train. You know what I mean? They still train, and I think the hunger's still there. And they're training, and you feel good, and you're like, why not go back in there and give this a shot? I think I could reach the top again. And that's for some of them. I mean, it's just fun. Like they just get a kick out of it. Like gives them that thrill that they're looking for. The Cowboy was like that for a little while. Ed Short Fuse Herman, I think he's a guy that's like been in the UFC for how long, but it just looks like he likes to have fun and challenge himself.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, that's a challenge for these guys and girls to go in there, and they're like, why not challenge? Like it has to be something too where you just feel like you're challenging yourself consistently, and then all of a sudden you're sitting on your couch and like, I'm not. What am I doing to challenge myself now? Let me get back in there. Let me like get in the gym and make that happen. So I would say it's a combination of the two, in my opinion.
right.
Um, Sean, how about yourself?
For what was the question?
For somebody that walked away a little too early.
Too early. I mean, Calvin Johnson, Luke Kuechly's another one that comes
Oh
to
yeah,
mind.
Luke.
Obviously,
Mhm.
with concussions, that's something that's a big factor there. But man, he was only 28. He was one of the most dominant middle linebackers in the game. Andrew Luck is another one that like a lot of people are like, man, like what could have happened
Yeah.
if he stayed in the league?
Hmm.
So a
Hmm.
lot of these guys, injuries was definitely a big part of it. Um, for me personally as a Dolphins fan, like Dan Marino, not seeing him get a Super Bowl, that was, it's like
Yeah.
I think that's part of it too, is like some of the guys who stay in there a little too long, right? If you look at the reasons why, it's like they're chasing, that one championship, or they're chasing like history, trying to beat someone's record, things like that. Um, but then also you hear sometimes these stories where someone, it seems like they may have been in there for too long, actually did it perfectly. Like one example that comes to mind is Glover Teixeira. He's, what, 40 something
Yeah.
nowadays?
Yeah.
And
That's a good one.
but
Hmm.
and everyone was like, "Oh man, like you're old, like you should be done, blah blah blah." And then he just kept winning and winning, and they're like, "I guess we'll put him in a title fight," and then he wins the title. It's like that, something like that is kind of crazy because it's same thing with like the Tom Brady, right? Like did Tom, like some people may say, "Oh, Tom stayed in there too long," but in Tom's mind, it's like I'm still winning. I up until the last year, he was in it every year and making the playoffs and dominating. So it's hard to justify someone like that, like, oh, you don't have it anymore, like you need to hang him up, type thing.
Yeah, like obviously thankful for Brady got us another chip, but yeah, like even Barry Sanders I think walked away pretty early. I think one of the bigger ones too was he was an Iron Man too. He's I think never really had any injuries with Joe Thomas.
Mhm.
Um, Joe Thomas was still a dominant offensive lineman, but he walked away. I think you're seeing it more and more now. There's been, and I can't remember the names off my top of my head, like NFL players retiring in their 20s. They, I think they are weighing their long-term health, and then, I think they maybe made the sound investments or they have that education that allows them to go on to, other things in life. And then I think a lot of these guys and girls, they have other goals and other opportunities that yeah, I enjoy the sport or I enjoy fighting or I enjoy the sport but I have other ways of making money and feeding my family or other like desires and goals. So Andrew Luck was a really tough one that you mentioned because I was like, man, he was out for such an amount of time that he finally got back and you're like, all right, cool. We get to see, a guy that labeled one of the all-time greats that you wanted to see him build his legacy further. You know what I mean? You want to see him get a Super Bowl. You wanted to see him, he was up there with Manning and Brady at that time and Rodgers. So you wanted to see him fulfill his legacy, and it was just weird how he retired too, because it was like, what was the preseason game? And he just kind of, or was it a regular season game? And he walked off the field and fans were booing. It was sad.
He was supposed to be that
Marino,
next.
you pointed him out. Mhm.
I think Luck was really supposed to be
Yeah,
that like next generation. After the Brady, the Ben Roethlisberger, Philip Rivers generation, like a lot of those guys were kind of like nearing the end on their way out, and like Luck was supposed to like transition into the generation that's now. You see Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, but like he was kind of that bridge between the older guys and the guys who are at the top right now, and yeah, it was very unfortunate to see him go.
yeah, and now there's the question of Aaron Rodgers. Should he return, or what are you guys' thoughts on that? Like an ACL injury at his age, and obviously, and I'll go into this
Or
after. There's
Achilles.
advances in science and advances. Hmm.
Achilles,
Go
not
ahead, sir.
ACL.
Yeah, sorry, Achilles, not his. Yeah, his Achilles injury. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's fine to return. I think he's crazy for trying to return this season. I think he's gonna like he claims that he got some like experimental procedure that allows him to return quicker than ever before, and like I think that's wild. But other than that, I mean, I think, like if he takes the time and does the rehab right, like I saw a video recently of him standing out in the field throwing the ball and he looked fine. So it's just, how sturdy is that and how much do you trust that Achilles after the injury? That's going to be the probably the deciding factor of how quickly he can come back.
Yeah, I agree. I think at his age, he needs to be patient with it and stuff. I know he's approaching 40, or he already is 40, and I mean, if he's gonna come back, he might as well like give himself the best chance of being 100%, so he can play like one last full season or maybe two last full seasons. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy that that's even like a possibility that he could come back this season. But I think if he's smart about it, if he waits and comes back next season, I think that's the right thing to do. And I think New York still has the right pieces. Has a lot of good pieces that when he comes back, he still has a team that he could go pretty far with. So um, I think it's a good idea if he comes back for another year.
I would agree. I'd say come back, test it out, see how it feels. Um,
Yeah.
like you said, he has the good pieces in place to still make it happen. He's still chasing another championship, and I can't fault him for that. And yeah, I don't know what miracle drug he's using or what magical potion he's using, but if it works, then shit, give it a try, and maybe more athletes will be put onto it if it's legal, that is. So yeah, it's also too like I was thinking of another guy that retired too early, and it's kind of something I want to branch off and ask you a question about, similar to the Rogers question, Justin. Is Henry Cejudo, I think he retired too early because now it seems one of the issues I think with retiring too early and then coming back is you're sometimes people aren't the same. I think Jordan was an exception because he came back and he was still the same guy. But Henry Cejudo, he's recently came back. I don't know if he's that same guy again. Um, John Jones, it came back and he won his first fight. But it's like you take all this time off, you can you get older. You're still training maybe, but maybe your skills diminish, and you give the opponents and the younger generation time to catch up and develop their skill set. And with John Jones now, you see it now. Unfortunately, I don't know if you guys saw the recent news that he's injured. He tore his pectoral muscle off of his shoulder, and it's like now, like, does he come back now, Justin? What are your thoughts on him, or do you just think he should ride off into the sunset?
No, no, I think he's gonna come back. I think they said it's probably gonna be like 6 to 8 months for him to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for John Jones, for his legacy, for everything that he's done, I feel like he's gonna want to come back and have that one last match to kind of ride off into the sunset, ride off into the sunset with. So I think something like that. Yeah, he took a long time off with going up to heavyweight. I think he took 3 years off, and I think ultimately it's the right decision for him to come back whenever he's healed and then have that one last fight against Stipe. Rebook it for later next year. So I think he'll come back, and then I think he's going to retire after that. I feel like that's the right kind of time for him to retire. Because he's been around for 8 years, and um, I just think it makes sense for him at this point.
Sean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I think, if you're at that level and like especially because it's like I think it's kind of known, right, that this fight against Stipe is like the last one that he wants to have. Like Stipe has kind of said the same thing. Like, I think they rescheduled, like they switched out another fight to take that fight on whatever pay-per-view that was. Um, because
Yes.
those guys literally like they both want to fight each other and then like that's it. I think they're both kind of like ready to potentially hang it up after that. So I think it makes sense to come back and have that one last fight for both of them, and against each other. Hopefully, it's able to work out that way, and that they're able to get him back, sometime mid next year. That'd be cool. So
I thought it would have been dope if they did UFC 300, but I don't think the timeline's definitely not gonna match up with his recovery and when 300's happening. But that would have been cool for them to be on 300. That would have been a great fight for 300. I don't know what they got lined up for 300, but that would have served as a main event that would be perfect for that. The longest reigning, the heavyweight with the most defenses and many people label him the goat of MMA, UFC. That clash on 300 would have been phenomenal. But I agree with you both. He has to come back. If this is the last one, you go out on this last one. He's all about his legacy, like nothing bigger than going up to heavyweight and defeating the guy, defending because everybody says you got to defend the belt once to be really the champion. So him defending it against the guy that had the most defenses in UFC history. Um, yeah, he's got to come back and do that. So kind of enough about the guys and the girls. We really didn't mention too many females, but that because I think if I mentioned a female that may have been able to walk away, it probably would be Serena Williams. Just to have a female out there. Serena Williams, I think she could walk away, and her legacy is already intact. So I think she could have walked away because I don't. Some of these women that I've seen her losing to, I feel like she could beat them, but I don't know. She's the one that I think could walk away. I don't know if you guys have any other females that you thought of.
Amanda Nunes,
Uh,
probably.
Nunes potentially. Rousey should have never took the second fight or the Nunes fight either. So that's one that could have probably retired. But I was gonna say we got to commend, and Sean brought it up, the guys and the girls that do stay in a little longer and still are performing at that high level. So you got to, like the LeBrons, you got to give him credit for his longevity. Kareem had a 20-year career. Is there any other, and we mentioned Brady, is there any other people that are still doing it or did it for that length of time where you're like, okay, they went out the right way?
Hmm.
Um, One person that comes to mind for me, and I think it's too, some people are very good at adjusting to, like, they stay in, but they adjust to a new role, right? So it's like the
Hmm.
Larry Fitzgerald, right? Like Larry Fitzgerald was a beast for a while, and yet he also, near the end of his career, he wasn't like, oh my God, he's going to light you up for 250 yards a game. But he knew his role. He was reliable still. He could catch everything, like he wasn't the speedster and like the separator that he used to be. So I think I always have respect for people like that who are able to kind of, um, you know, continue to do it for a long time. Frank Gore is another guy who just
Yes.
continued to defy like age. That
Hmm.
that dude felt like he was 29 for like 10 years because once you hit 30 as a running back, you're basically non-existent, and that dude just kept going and going and going.
Hmm.
I think of like Adrian Peterson too. That guy was
Yeah.
ridiculous. He tore his
Same.
ACL in
Yep.
his 30s and then came back and was like an all-star.
Yeah, no, those are all good ones. Yeah, and I did mention GSP earlier, but I think GSP walked away at the right time as well, and then he came back and walked away again at probably the right time, getting the belt, and then because there was some killers at 185 that was
Yeah.
like, damn, if GSP holds onto this belt, I don't know. I would still wanted to see him fight, but John Jones has that opportunity if he comes back healthy and does this. You know, it, there's been a couple of athletes that I think walked away, and it was just like, I think even Jerome Bettis was a great one because he walked away with a championship. When you can walk away and you've won your last memory was a championship. I think that's the best way to because imagine you're declined and you're remembering your last memory is this loss. But to walk away and like, okay, I know I'm not the guy I used to be, but I'm walking away as a champion, and that's my last memory on the field or in the wherever. I think that's huge. I think that's to me the ultimate way to kind of go out is on top like that.
But if you're walking away when you're on top, what does that mean for, like, if you're already winning, who's to say you wouldn't have won the next one? Like, I think that's kind of the Brady mindset, right? Is he won? He could have walked away after he won, but he stayed because he's like, I think I can win another. So it's like,
Well, I
who's
think that's the separates I think there's tiers to every athlete, and I think that's what put Brady on that top tier. The GOAT tier is that attitude. Like, what's your favorite championship? The next one. He's already thinking about next year. The moment he wins that championship, that Super Bowl, I should say, he's already thinking about, okay, I'm ready to do this again next year and like make that one better, make next year better than this year. You
true?
asking the question, sure?
No.
Oh, I thought you were asking
Um,
me.
I mean, I do have another question, which is like, what do you guys think the main reason is that some of these athletes stay in too long, or I know obviously for retiring too early, most of the time it's due to injuries or due to, family circumstances, I would say, or like the top two. But what do you guys think the reasons are for staying too long?
I think a
For
lot of
me, I
it.
think the number one is. Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I think a big reason is financial reasons. Like if your main job is fighting or something like that, and then you retire, well, what are you gonna do for money? You gotta figure out something else, and eventually that wealth starts to dry up, so then you have to come back.
Yeah, I think that's one. I think legacy as well. Like people are always trying to chase the championship. They're trying to catch those before them and equal their championships. I think a big thing that's been happening now is it even happened with like Brett Favre, and Brett Favre was a guy that lasted a long time, and he, give him credit for his longevity. But he was chasing some records as well. He wanted the passing records. He wanted and Drew Brees ended up, I guess, surpassing him in a lot, quite a few of those. But and then Brady ended up passing Brees. But yeah, sometimes it's the records, it's the accolades, it's notching your name in the history books. I think that's one of the bigger things for some of these guys and girls. And even I mentioned Serena was chasing the title, the Grand Slam number. I forget who holds that. Just brain fart. But and then even Tiger trying to catch up with the majors. He stayed in extra, I think, longer than he probably would have wanted to with all the injuries and back issues to capture that number. Um, Verstappen now in F1 is killing it, and he's chasing Lewis Hamilton's records of first places. So yeah, I always think it's that legacy and to notch your name. Not always, but it could be the financial. But it's a lot of times the legacy and trying to notch your name at the top of a list. And unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, not unfortunately. Sometimes now it's about stats as well, and getting on the top of the stat chart. But for me, I think the most honorable is like the championship, chasing more championships and trying to be, call yourself the best of whatever sport you're in. I think that's obviously kind of the most admirable of all of the reasons to stay in it.
I agree.
So I kind of wanted to wrap up with like, what do you guys think about, kind of modern technology and the new way these guys and girls train, the new nutritional things, and do you guys see that being? And now we have the load management thing. I want to throw that in there as well. But do you guys see that as a way for a lot of these athletes, all of those, the combination of those things, a way for these athletes to stay in the game longer now and like have longer, more lucrative, more successful playing careers?
I do. I think for whether it's football or whether it's fighting or things like that, I think because of technology and just smarter practices, like fighters. There's a lot of fighters that I hear don't really spar anymore. Just they don't want to take that damage in training camp, so that they're mainly only fighting in the fights, so that's going to extend your career however long, because there's all sorts of fighters that would have those wars in the training room, which don't really mean anything, but they damage your career lifespan. So I
Hmm.
think just being smarter, that in and of itself is extending people's careers, and then um, for something like football, yeah, like load management. I think about someone like Christian McCaffrey. He's a monster running back, but he was kind of like the bell cow in Carolina. But now I feel
Hmm.
like in San Francisco, they're a little bit more like just giving him less, like slightly less reps, so that like he has a chance to take a break and recover, and kind of extend his playability throughout the season. That way he doesn't get injured by like week 9 or something like that. So I think there's a lot that's going on now that has kind of been just able to help people extend their careers overall. And there's all sorts of opportunities after football too. So it's kind of like people will have something to fall back on once they do retire, so that they can stay retired. They don't have to keep coming back to the sport and putting on like performances when they're not who they used to be anymore. So I think
Hmm.
there's a lot that's improved the way players kind of walk away from their sport.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some new avenues for like life following football and life following these other sports, like through sponsorship deals and even like just building your own personal brand. I think a lot of
Yeah.
athletes these days do a lot better of a job with that. NIL, some of these athletes are millionaires before they even get to the pros these days. So, being able to
Yeah.
make some money through that, and then you can like when you make that money early, you're able to invest it and set yourself up for later. If you're smart with your money, not everyone is smart with their money. Um, but I do like that. And then as far as the original question about technology and how that is helpful, I do think it's going to be very helpful. I remember one guy that stayed in the MLB for a long, long time was Ichiro Suzuki, and he was on the Marlins near the end of his career, and he was like 40 something, but he still was. He was more of a role player at that point, but he was still very fast, very able to do what he needed to do. And I remember reading an article where Tom Brady reached out to him and was like, "Hey, like, how do you stay in shape? Like, how are you still so flexible, still so good at like what you do?" And there was like a quote from Ichiro where he was like, "Who is Tom Brady?" Because he didn't know football. But he had this entire like gym equipment system that had been shipped over from China or Japan, and
Japan.
like it was this whole like flexibility system that he used, and it was what like made his career last so long. And I think stuff like that is helpful, and I think even what we're working on, can be very helpful. Just better understanding of your body, of what like the damage it's taking, and how to try to prevent that damage, and just like longer your career a little bit, whether it's through like hopefully not through too much load management, but not putting yourself at unnecessary risk of creating more harm by coming back too early, or by pushing yourself too hard when you don't need to, things like that.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because Ichiro Suzuki, Brady adopted that, and he did more flexibility and band work than anything, and he contributes that to his longevity along with the Brady method, the diet, and all of that. Being very strict about it. Even Jerry Rice and guys like that, they just train smarter, and I think more athletes are adopting that mindset now, training smarter, dieting right. It's like a year round job. It's not something you do during the regular season and training camp. Just doing it year round, and those tend to be the athletes that last longer. Also, too, just obviously preaching to the choir here, and also telling the audience like what we're doing. I know it's going to have a huge impact, and we've heard that from people that we presented to, that it's going to have a huge impact on helping athletes, even everyday people, to whatever you want to get out of life. If you want to break a record in whatever sport, or if you want to just be healthy, or monitor like maybe a adverse condition you have, like we have the technology to do that. So really interested in this topic is very interesting overall, but our place in history and helping people, excited about that. So with that being said, we want to thank everybody for joining us today, and like, comment, subscribe. Keep looking out for us. Have a blessed week and a great weekend, and take care of yourselves. Thank you.